Welcome in, everybody, to SportsGrid. Good morning. This is Fantasy Sports Today. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia. With me this morning is George Kurtz, and it's all of you getting ready for Week 5 in fantasy. The bye weeks are here, George Kurtz, and when you couple the injuries with the byes, it's getting a little rough out there in the fantasy streets. How are your teams surviving right now? Are you doing okay, George? Do you need maybe a drink early this morning before the week gets underway in England?
That's the key, right? We have to remind everybody the game's starting in an hour and a half, right? So set your lineups there. Don't forget we have the early games starting in England here. We got a couple of games in England, a couple of games in Germany. I think this year as well here. So we're doing this. So yeah, set your lineups there. For the most part, my teams. I mean, we all have injuries. If you've escaped injuries, God bless, but they haven't killed me yet. All right, how about that? So I'm not getting destroyed in any league with injuries. Maybe one. So far, so good here. Like everybody else, though, Joe, tight end is driving me up the freaking wall.
I feel like that's every year we go into something where we go, oh, this is so good this year. And in the inverse, too, oh, no, this is so terrible and ends up being really good. And tight end is a perfect example of that because last year, everybody looked at that position as saying, oh, this is the worst year ever for a tight end. And it ended up being a pretty solid season in terms of return on fantasy investment, right? This year going in, everybody looked at the tight end position and said, this is a generational group. Look how young, look how talented they are. Look at the roles in the offense. And so far, at least, it's been crickets for the most part and injuries to get to. We're going to get you update on everything there. But we have to start with a premium wide receiver who wants out. Is Davante Adams leaving Las Vegas? Well, we're going to find out pretty soon. It certainly seems that way. Rumors going to the Jets, maybe even some outside the box ideas like the Baltimore Ravens I've been hearing lately as well. So it's a very frustrating time here for fantasy managers when it comes to Davante Adams because he's an elite wide receiver in the games he's played so far this year, even though he's been limited with Gardner Minshew to a certain degree. Davante Adams recognizes where he's at in his career, what time it is, which is towards the end. And he's only got so much left in the tank, and he doesn't want to burn that fuel with the Las Vegas Raiders. And frankly, George, I don't blame him. I think he kind of got a raw deal here. He went there to play with Derek Carr. Derek Carr's not there anymore. Therefore, I think Davante Adams should be able to work his way out of there if he wants to be gone. You might as well get what you can. The Chiefs would be a really tough sell considering they're in that division. So before we get to the fantasy aspect of Davante Adams and all this kerfuffle going around him, what do you think in terms of prediction of where Adams might end up? Is it just as simple as another reunion for Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, the latest in the Lazard and Randall Cobb saga that, Aaron Rodgers just wants his old friends around all the time?
Aaron Rodgers is a freak. Anyway, he is. He's just an annoying guy. First thing he says this year is, we want no more distractions. Oh, but I'm not coming to mandatory minicamp. Yeah, okay. Whatever. Listen, you're looking at the same teams that wanted Brandon Ayuk, right? So you're looking at Pittsburgh here. Do I think they're going to get him? No. But that's what you're looking at. We have to remember, Adams has no more guaranteed money. He's going to want a new contract here, so he's going to be able to, hey, I ain't going. The Jets, listen, you already got one problem with Hassan Reddick. I assume if they do acquire him, and yes, I do think the Jets are the odds-on favorite because they have the money, they can afford him. I guess you can argue there's a need for him here. I don't know if there truly is. Get the ball to Garrett Wilson, that A-Rod problem solved there. But they will have him signed to a new contract first, I would think. How about Washington? We've heard Adams mentioned before how much he was hoping that Jaden Daniels would fall in the draft to the Raiders because he wanted to play with them. Once again, Washington, the fact that they got off to such a better start than we thought, now maybe they're going to compete with the NFC East. Forget the playoffs. Maybe they're going to compete with the division title here. Wouldn't another receiver look really good there? I don't think this would be a conversation if they were 1-3, but they're 3-1. So I think they're in the talks here. You mentioned Derek Carr, and what you said is absolutely true. That's why Adams wanted to go there, wanted to play with Derek Carr. New Orleans, once again, I don't think so, but there's a possibility there. And of course, the team over my left shoulder, they get mentioned with everybody, right? The Dallas Cowboys. Although once again, Jerry Jones, who had to land on the practice field this week in a helicopter during practice, another freak, has said no, the Cowboys will not be going after Davante Adams. Apparently, they can't afford him either.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, George, because that's how I came to the show this morning. So I landed in my helipad. I came down here and started working today for everybody out there in the fantasy landscape. And look, if you look at Adams this year, 3 games, 18 catches, 209 yards, 1 touchdown. I like the Washington landing spot as well. I think there's a chance, and we'll talk about it later in the show, that Washington could be this year's version of the Houston Texans from last year. The Baltimore situation, I think, is an intriguing one. They really don't have an alpha dog wide receiver. It would certainly help. I think this is the time for Baltimore to go all in, especially with some of the issues the Chiefs have had, despite the fact they keep winning games. Some issues there. Also on the landscape, too, not just Devontae Adams right now, where we're in a holding pattern as fantasy owners. You're trying to figure out what are you going to do here, and you just have to keep streaming wide receivers. We're going to help with that as we go. But a lot of people don't even want to play some of their Miami Dolphin wide receivers. People want to bench Tyreek Hill. I don't think I'm there yet. You can't bench one of the 1 overall pick type guys. I know last week was frustrating. Maybe another week with Tyler Huntley is what we need here. Christian Gonzalez is a very good corner, but Tyreek Hill is elite. Justin Jefferson's elite. Jamar Chase is elite. I don't sit my elite players unless we're talking a 2 wide receiver, 10-team league, in which case you have so many options. I get it. The Jaguars are up against it this week. They're on the verge of potentially going 0-5, and they're not going to have Evan Ingram again, George. So sticking with a little Florida football here, the Jaguars just can't seem to get out of their own way. If they go to 0-5, is this the end of Doug Peterson potentially in 2024?
I'm a little surprised Doug Peterson is still there now. It's getting to the point where you look at the schedule now. By the way, whenever I look to my right, I'm looking at a computer screen, for those who are wondering. And I
thought you were just getting tired of me already in the first segment, George.
Oh, that's a given. All right, that's
okay.
automatic.
Well, at least we've established that at the top of the show.
All right. I don't want to fool anybody, make anybody think I'm not tired of Joe. That happened years ago. But you're wondering, for me, I'm wondering, because remember, this goes on through last season. This is not just a this season problem. They've lost, 10 straight games, or 10 out of 11 with Peterson and Lawrence going on here? The owner spent a truckload of money on this team. All right? Whether it was right or wrong, he did. So he's getting impatient here. All right? Indianapolis, Chicago, New England. I guess he's got 3 weeks to turn this thing around against, and I'm not saying Chicago is a bad team, right? Indianapolis is a bad team, but they're not the greatest of teams. I think he's got to go 2-1 here. He goes 1-2, 0-3. He's not making it to Green Bay because they play, the next 2 weeks are in England. All right. At least they're in Europe. They play Chicago and New England overseas here. I would assume it's London. So if they lose this week, he doesn't make it to England. You can look at it that way too, but I don't think they would fire a coach while in England. So it's either going to fire it if you lose today, you're going to fire it in this game, or you're going to throw him over the Atlantic Ocean, you kick him out the plane. So it's going to be one of those two, assuming they don't go 2-1 or 3-0.
Just another really tough situation though, because you have Trevor Lawrence, who again, generational quarterback prospect, and now he's going to have a 3rd coach here already in his career pretty soon, and then another offensive coordinator next year, and another. I mean, it's just. The cycle continues to go on and on. One more big injury obviously happened last week. We have to talk about Rashee Rice, another wide receiver that's out. And when you couple that with some of the injuries that have gone on here and some of the bye weeks on top of it, it's tough out there streaming wide receivers. You're looking for the Jordan Whittingtons of the world, the Curtis Samuels of the world potentially. We're going to break down some of those guys later in the show. But Rice goes on the IR. But again, we don't have a lot of clarity. We're still waiting for that, George. It feels to me like the Chiefs are sort of keeping things quiet as much as they possibly can, perhaps to give them a little bit of leverage when it comes to a trade. A lot of guys have been floated out there, including maybe potentially DeAndre Hopkins, which would make a lot of sense here. Look, if you are the Chiefs and you're trying to go for this 3-peat, and Rashee Rice is indeed out for the year, you don't have enough at wide receiver with Xavier Worthy and with Hollywood Brown already out for the season. So you got to figure out something. I know it's been the worst luck, but the Chiefs have got to do something with their bye looming next week. When we come back, the booms of week 5. Who are they? We'll tell you after this.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
Welcome back, everybody, to Fantasy Sports Today. Here, Joe Pisapia with you, taking you through the guys who are going to rule Week 5. So don't worry, there's a lot of points to be scored this week, and I'm looking at the Packers. I know Christian Watson's going to be out. Romeo Doubs is unhappy with his role, so he's not going to be around, which is ironic because he's been on the field more than any other Packer wide receiver this year. Maybe you need to do a little bit more with that time, Romeo. I'm just saying. But it all starts with Jordan Love, who shook the dust off last week in the first half, coming out slow of the gate after that knee injury, and then almost catching up to the Minnesota Vikings. Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, all these guys really lead me to believe this matchup against the Rams today is going to be a good one. I have some stacks in DFS. I've got investments in wagering. I've got some fantasy guys lined up, locked and loaded, ready to go on the Green Bay Packers, as many as you can get. And if it fails, it fails. But the Rams have proven to me, George, that this is a defense you could score on all day long. Now, Josh Jacobs doesn't have a rushing touchdown all year. You could throw him into this mix. Maybe this is where that streak finally gets broken. I don't know. But what I do know is that if I'm looking for a guy who could potentially throw for 300 yards today, I'm circling Jordan Love. I think this could be a huge game for him and the Green Bay Packers here. So let's talk about Jordan Love, what you saw in the second half last week, and what you think you might see out of him in Week 5.
Yeah, that was the thing, right? The first half last week wasn't very good. All right, it wasn't. They're like, okay, I'm glad I sat him, right? Glad I sat him because I didn't want to. Yeah. Second half was like, oh, God, why did I sit him? You know, he came out firing. Now, he threw some bad passes to the other team, right? Threw out a couple of pickups, but the bottom line is this. He's back to being Jordan Love, which is a top 10 quarterback, right? And that's all we wanted. All right, I agree with everything you said there. I do like the debate and argue with Joe, but not about this. I'm with him on Green Bay. Maybe a Tucker Kraft or a Luke Musgrave is the only player you're not starting here. Other than that, all your Packers are going. All right, and if Dobbs didn't do something stupid this week where he skipped practice, he'd be going too. And I found it weird, by the way, that he picks the week where they're not going to have Christian Watson, where there's now more routes to be run, more throws to be caught here. This the week you have a hissy fit. And by the way, you're Romeo Doubs. All right, you're not, Chad Judge. You're not Odell Beckham. You're not that kind of diva. Nobody cares, that you do this. It's just dumb, really dumb here. I just found it a weird week to go off on the deep end here. So you want your Green Bay Packers. You already said it. The Rams defense, not good, not good. You should eat as a Packer fan.
Yeah, look, Green Bay definitely in a great spot here. We're going to get to some more Packers in a second before we get to the running back boom of the week. But the Rams are allowing a league worst 9.14 yards per pass attempt. Only Washington, Carolina have allowed more touchdown passes than the Rams. So just saying, this should be a chance. Well, I have got him ranked this week as my quarterback one in my rankings. That's how good of a day I think it's going to be. Speaking of big performers, let's talk about Ken Walker here. Ken Walker III did some crazy non-human like things last time we saw him, just breaking tackles and doing a little jiu-jitsu on the ground. I don't know what was going on there, a little MMA action, somehow breaking tackles and still going. An incredible performance. This week he gets the New York Football Giants. I love DK Metcalf for this matchup. I love Geno in this matchup. Malik Neighbors is out. We're going to break down the ramifications for that in hour 2 of the show, but let's focus here on this matchup because it feels, again, Zach Charbonnet will probably get a couple touches here and there, but will fade into the background a little bit. I don't think if you have Walker, you should drop Charbonnet because the whole point of drafting Charbonnet in the first place was to ensure your Ken Walker shares. And if you did that, you probably survive some of these Ken Walker missed weeks. But with Walker being back in this matchup against the Giants, where I think they're going to have a lead on those football Giants, I see a lot of workload ahead for Ken Walker. That's a good thing. Volume is king in fantasy football. So can he be king of the running backs here in week 5, George?
This game's going to be an ass kicking. All right, forget a lead. I think they destroy the Giants today. I do. Cross-country trip for the Giants, no Malik Neighbors. And by the way, the Neighbors, that one hurts, by the way. Got him in a bunch of leagues. That one hurts. All right. And he gave himself that concussion, too. Just whatever. Frustration. I said this whole game frustrates me. I needed one extra touchdown from Geno Smith on Monday night to win a league. All right, one. He had like 9,000 yards passing, and of course DK Metcalf had a touchdown overturned, rightfully so. His elbow was down. Bobo the clown, he catches the ball at the 1, then he falls down before he gets into the end zone. Thanks. Geno has first and goal from the 5-yard line. Throws 4 passes into the end zone that were the worst 4 passes he threw all night, and I don't get my touchdown. All right, I'm a little salty. Not to mention the last drive where he threw the triple coverage into the end zone that got picked off. I'm still angry. I really needed that win, Joe.
I couldn't tell, George. Are you sure? For those, are you upset about it still? I'm really.
It doesn't help any that
I
I sat Kenneth Walker now differently at my home league because it was a Monday night game. I wasn't sure he's going to play. All right, that one. So the whole game just made me angry to no end.
I always say angry George is the best George, though.
I'm trying not to be. I mean, you should have been here watching the Yankee game with me last night. You definitely angry George. You won't see it tonight during the Cowboy game. I just don't expect much from the Cowboys tonight. Anyway, you're not sitting Kenneth Walker, and you really shouldn't be even thinking about about releasing Zach Charbonnet. Most running backs or running back situations are some kind of committee, right? There are very few number ones here. Now we have the bye weeks. You're gonna need to replace people. Listen, 5-6 points out of Charbonnet. Maybe you get lucky, finds the end zone, you get double digits. Is better than whatever you're gonna find off the waiver wire at this time. So I'm definitely not releasing Charbonnet. I expect Kenneth Walker to have a big game today. Geno Smith, another big game, and I'm sure he'll throw multiple touchdowns today that I don't need it as much. My only thought process would maybe no Tyler Lockett, but even Tyler, I'm playing him in a league or two as well with the bye weeks. I can't afford not to. Seahawks today, I think they scored 27 plus points.
All right, let's get to the wide receivers going to boom, and it's Jaden Reed. He's ranked as a top 5 guy in the expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros this week, which makes a lot of sense to me. The Rams have allowed the 8th highest PPR points per target to slot receivers this season, and guess where Jaden Reed plays? And, we're talking about him being the poor man's Deebo Samuel. Maybe he's just the new Deebo Samuel at this stage in everyone's career. That's what it's starting to feel like. The Rams play a lot of single high. Jaden Reed is so good against that. He has got a yards per route run of 5.5 in fantasy nerd terms. That's very good. Dontavian Wicks also, who saw a ton of targets last week, is going to be working in this offense also. He has big play touchdown upside. So all your Packers you've got, throw them out there because it should be a pretty good week. But unfortunately, not everything is going well for every player. Some matchups are tough this week. And on top of that, some offenses are just trending in the wrong direction. Who are the guys that are on the fringe of starting this week? We'll talk about them and some big names at that when we return after this.
anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
All right, so we got to the booms. Now it's time to get to the busts because you can't have one without the other. And Tyreek Hill so far has been a disappointment. But so have the Miami Dolphins. Now, Tyler Huntley last week, a lot of people on Monday Night Football thought maybe he would be the good luck charm to break out some of the Dolphin wide receivers. And old Jalen Waddle got some work. It was not a pretty night for Tyreek Hill. But it's another week into the offense, and Tyreek Hill right now has been dropped in the rankings significantly right now. And significant, I mean, wide receiver 26. This is a guy usually doesn't fall out of the top 3, and with good reason, because of the big playmaking ability he has. Now, I understand Christian Gonzalez is a strong corner in this league, a good young player, but there's an elite wide receiver tier, and it's a very small class, and Tyreek Hill is still in it. I have a hard time benching him. I understand circumstances for certain teams are a little different, but let's run through some names here and see where you're at. I know, George, you said you sat him last week in one of your leagues and ended up working out for you. This week, would you rather play Dontavian Wicks or Tyreek Hill? Because right now, those guys are back-to-back in the ranks.
All right, now I have no problem sitting anybody. After you draft people, by the way, I don't care what round you draft. It no longer matters. Whether I sit you, whether I start you, whether I trade you. Oh, I can't trade him. He's my first-round pick. I don't care about that. All right, if the trade makes sense, he moves here. Now, a league I traded him in, I sat him in, I have great wide receivers. So it was my choice was Malik Neighbors last week. He replaced them. So keep that in mind here. It was an easy choice there. That being said, 10-87-0. That's Tyreek Hill's numbers the last 3 weeks combined. That's awful. All right, so I can definitely sit him. I'm not sitting him this week in that league, by the way. As you know, Neighbors not playing. I don't have the backup this week. He has to go there. That being said, if your team is Hill or Wicks, I'm playing Wicks. Listen, I have a hard time believing you can't fit both, by the way, but if that's your choice, Hill sits. I need to see it. I'll be the first to admit, Joe, Huntley took his shots at the Hill last week and probably could have had 2 big, probably could have, and maybe should have, at least one. And I think they'll take their shots again, but they're not hitting them. Bottom line, and you and I both believe Green Bay eats big week. If that's my choices, I have to start Wicks. No choice.
I want to start Wicks, but starting him over Tyreek Hill, I just can't do. I mean, the explosiveness of Tyreek Hill, he just needs that one big play. And I know everyone's freaking out there. I know when you look in the rankings, you see him around guys like Xavier Worthy and Rashid Shaheed. I'm sorry. Like, I'm still starting Tyreek Hill for better or for worse. And it might be for worse, but this is what you got yourself into. And you didn't realize that you were going to have Tua missing time. Now, the good news is it seems like Tua is aiming to return in week 8, and the bye week is coming up next week for the Miami Dolphins. So it's something to monitor closely. The shots downfield are what's encouraging to me that you mentioned, George. To me, that is why I'm going to give Hill another shot here. I think he can get the job done. Again, I just need that one big play from Tyreek Hill, that one touchdown, that one moment, and he is capable of giving that. He just needs a little bit more time, I think, with Tyler Huntley, and hopefully those two got together in practice and maybe worked out some of the kinks. Najee Harris against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Dallas is missing a couple guys here on the defensive side of the football. DeMarcus Lawrence goes in the IR. Micah Parsons isn't healthy. But I was very unimpressed by what I've seen out of Najee Harris so far in the last couple weeks, especially last week against a defense in the Indianapolis Colts that frankly just isn't very good. So, George, this is a tough one for me. I don't think you're sitting Najee Harris, but it does kind of feel like it is a very underwhelming start. Right now on the league board, he is running back 33 on the year. Now, he is still ranked as an RB2, but it just feels like, you know, guys like James Conner, even Brian Robinson Jr. might be better starts this week. What are your thoughts on Najee, what you've seen, and what he hasn't given you so far from the Pittsburgh Steelers offense point of view?
Oh, my God. James Conner and Brian Robinson have much better starts. That's not even a discussion. You're talking about borderline RB1s here. Maybe Conner's a little rough because he's playing San Fran, and you'll need a touchdown. As for Harris, and now when we say starts, we have to keep in mind here, it depends on what else you have on your roster. You know, we don't know that. I'm probably starting him. You already said it. Not that we care about Parsons as far as a run stopper, but DeMarcus Lawrence pretty much is the Cowboys' best run stopper here. There's also a problem with the linebacker whose name I cannot remember. It's tough there, like whatever Hawaiian name. Good luck trying to pronounce that. And once again, not that he's great, but the best Dallas has here. The game could be a slop fest tonight, as it might rain there. Pittsburgh's going to. Bottom line is this. You'd have to be pretty good at running back not to start Harris tonight. I don't love him. I don't, but I'm starting him against the Cowboys who can't stop a nosebleed here. And no Jaylen Warren means he gets all those touches, right? So I am more than likely starting Harris tonight, even though I think he's nothing more than a pedestrian running back.
Yeah. Also, Patrick Mahomes, a guy that you really have to look at and say, do you want to start Justin Fields? Mahomes has been rough. No Rushy Rice. Big question. We return to look at the DFS board for week 5. Go anywhere.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
Welcome back in, everyone, to FST here on SportsGrid. It's time to take a look at the DFS plays for Week 5. And let's start with the running backs, and let's start with the king, Derrick Henry. I am so happy that I bet the over on the 925.5 yards because I'm pretty sure Derrick Henry got most of it, and we're just about there last week against the Buffalo Bills. That was an incredible performance by Derrick Henry. So good start there. Of course, that makes him very expensive this week, 9,200. I don't think it's wrong. There's some other ways I want to spend Green Bay Packers, but I digress. Jordan Mason in a game script that probably favors the run game and a lead, one would think, although the Cardinals have played tough against the 49ers in the past. We'll see if Kyler Murray can drag himself out of that, and we'll also see if Trey McBride plays or not. He is now questionable, so that is into our sphere as well in that game. Ken Walker, we already talked about being a great investment at 7,400. It's a really good opportunity. Josh Jacobs, although without a touchdown on the year, this is a really good matchup against the Rams, and if they get up early in that second half, you could see a lot of work from Jacobs, maybe some from Wilson as well. And then Chuba Hubbard at 6,800. The last couple of weeks here with Joe Flacco has been pretty productive. I think he's one of the better ROIs on the board. So when you're looking at these names, or maybe another one pops out to you on the running back board potentially in Week 5, where do your eyes go, and who do you want to get in those lineups, George?
Well, if we're talking about guys we haven't talked about yet. How about Jerome Ford? All right, could be his last start this week against the Washington team, not the greatest defense on the planet. I know they played a very good game against Arizona last week. I know that because I have Kyler Murray in the league too. Thanks, Kyler. No, annoying to put it nicely. Yes, everything's about me, okay? Everything. All right, so it was frustrating last week. But Jerome Ford is someone I might want to look at here. Once again, besides the backs that we mentioned here, I think Kenneth Walker's a must start. Are you going to get 3 touchdowns? Probably not. But 6,800? Yeah, he's in my lineup. And like I said, I think Seattle's scoring 27-plus points. It's at least 3 touchdowns, maybe 4. I'd be a little surprised, Joe, if he doesn't get in the end zone for at least one of them.
Let's take a look at the wide receivers here, George, and let's start with Jamar Chase, 9,300. Again, we've seen a lot of big numbers in some of these matchups over the years between the Bengals and Ravens, where that total goes way above 60. These typically end up being some fun games. And with the fact that the Cincinnati Bengals can't seem to stop anybody on defense, maybe this is a good week to be investing in Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Maybe not so much the running backs. But cheaper is the wide receiver 1 in fantasy, Nico Collins, which I was a huge supporter of going into this season. I thought he should have been a fringe first-round pick. And it's crazy to look at now because he is the wide receiver 1 on the fantasy board. That's the way things are broken down right now. People were worried about Stephon Diggs. People were worried about Tank Dell. I don't know why, because if you watched last year, it was pretty clear that Nico Collins was the man, and he is the man here. Now, I think this total might underwhelm just a bit, but it doesn't matter. Nico's going to eat. It's going to be a good situation. Then, of course, we got DK Metcalf at 8,200 against the Giants. Very good matchup for him. George mentioned earlier, we think they can go over 27 points, maybe get into the 30s today. Jaden Reed, one of my favorite must plays of the week at 7,200, a really good return on investment. And frankly, $1,000 difference between him and DK Metcalf. I'm going to take Jaden Reed every time. Now, the roster percentage might be high, but we're still going to go ahead and take him anyway. And then Xavier Legette, who's sort of having a mini breakout recently, which is nice to see here with Andy Dalton at QB. You're seeing Xavier Legette get a little rushing equity to get the ball in his hands kind of situation. You saw him with his first career touchdown recently, so good for him. So let's talk about Xavier Legette. Let's talk about some of these other names here. I want to start with Legette because he is kind of the trendy pickup of the week, or at least one of them. And Andy Dalton's made this kid relevant, and he certainly does have some talent. They did invest some draft capital in Carolina in the young wide receiver. Do you think this is a trend that can grow, or do you think what we saw last week was a one-off?
I think it can grow. I do. I mean, let's face it. If you have anybody on the Panthers, the best thing that happened to you, fantasy-wise, was Bryce Young getting benched. It really was. Whatever you think about Dalton, he can run a pro offense where Young just can't right now. At least not the Carolina Panthers offense. We'll see what happens in his future there. So yes, I do believe that better things are coming for Legette. I don't know about today. Chicago Bears, better defense at Chicago. Not loving this for Legette. He's somebody I would not want to start today. If I can get away with it, once again, bye weeks you may not be able to. So I do like his future. This may be the future. That may not be the present, which is today.
Yes. Look, I think Legette is a pretty good start today. The way that they utilize him, if they keep doing that, that's a good thing. Again, it's kind of like that Jaden Reed thing where they're just getting him the football in space. that's a good thing. More touches, more fantasy points, or more potential for big plays as well. Let's take a look at the quarterbacks, George. Usual suspects at the top, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I'm going to fade those guys, though, for the Jaden Daniels and Jordan Love group. If you look at the difference in price, Jaden Daniels getting very close here to Lamar Jackson, only $100 difference between them. And look, you can kind of recognize whether or not you want to go with Lamar at this point or Jaden Daniels. He has been so good, and the confidence just seems to continue to grow for him too, finally opening up the passing game the last 2 weeks. It's been great to see, and finally the rebirth of Terry McLaurin too, a guy that I am heavily invested in 2024. And I don't want to say I was panicked in the first 2 weeks, but I was definitely disappointed. However, it seems like patience was the best practice there. Also on that board of the quarterbacks, Jordan Love, 8,200. To me, that's the sweet spot of QB. Might be chalky. I don't care. It's about being right at the end of the day. Justin Fields at 7,600, though. He was my big investment last week. I know it was ugly in the first half, boys and girls, but if you hung around for the second, it was pretty good. Fantasy points galore. You got the rushing touchdown equity of Justin Fields every week. I think he gets in the end zone this week as well, and I think you're still getting that at plus 120 in most spots here. So I love the investment in Justin Fields this week to score again. But let's talk about the fantasy QBs here. How do you see this board? How do you want to invest? Do you want to buy in to the big names or fade down to maybe the Loves or maybe even the Justin Fields and take some of those fantasy points that he gets with his legs?
Now, if you watched the show yesterday with Craig and I, you already heard that I am in love with Justin Fields this week, right? He was one of my bold predictions. I think he's going to have a monster game, 3 total touchdowns, run for at least 50 yards plus. I might have to calm down that a little bit. The weather tonight could be sloppy in Pittsburgh. Try and find out more about that before the 1 o'clock start time. If the weather's sloppy, it could hurt his production, could hurt everyone's production in that game if it's that kind of game here, but we're not sure about that yet. Jordan Love's the one that sticks out, right? If you don't want to pay up for Allen. Listen, and I generally do want to pay up for one of the quarterbacks that runs. All right, I want those extra points from Allen. Lamar Jackson, he hasn't really been asked to do much because Derrick Henry is killing everybody. All right, so keep that in mind here. I probably would not go with L. Jackson until the passing game picks up. I said it's not a knock on him. They haven't needed him to do anything. Nobody can stop Derrick Henry. But don't pay for him, Jerry. Good move there. But Jordan Love's the one I'm definitely looking at here. If you want to go cheap at quarterback, all right. I don't think Anthony Richardson plays today. Joe Flacco, for whatever we think about him, puts up numbers. All right, I like Michael Pittman a lot today, too, at wide receiver, but for that reason. Only if Richardson's out. I wouldn't like Pittman if Richardson's playing here, but that's the way you could look. If you want to get really cheap at quarterback, which generally I don't do, and pay up for running back, pay up for wide receiver, pay up for tight end, I can see you going that direction as well.
All right, let's go to the next grouping here. The tight ends, Brock Bowers at 6,300, Jake Ferguson at 62. Dalton Kincaid's been kind of, let's be honest, mid this year at 6,100. Now, I wanted to start Evan Ingram because I thought he was coming back. Guess what? That's not happening. Tucker Kraft sitting there at 5,300. Another interesting way to get a piece of this offense. So if everyone is invested in Reed and Dontavian Wicks, I think some investments in Tucker Kraft would be interesting as well. Tight end plays this week, George. How do you see them?
Well, you can't pay for McBride, right? Because we don't know if he's going to play. He's questionable now with the ribs, so I'm not doing that. Odds are I'm going with Bowers because I think Surtain takes Myers out. Adams ain't playing. Who else are you throwing to? I mean, it's possible. There's no one else there. Bowers has to move the ball there through the air for the Raiders there. I can see you going for Kincaid and hoping that this is the week. This is the week, right? There's no one. Once again, someone's got to be his main target. So this is going to be the week that the cake goes off. I can see it going for that. Ferguson with Dallas, same thing. Outside of CeeDee Lamb, there's no one else there in Cowboy land either.
With the bye weeks begun and certainly a lot of injuries and moving pieces, it's a good time to start making some trades in your leagues. When we return, we're going to talk about some big names that could be on the move and could be had, including a guy that was a first-round wide receiver who might be right now the most traded player in fantasy. Who is it? How much time do you have to trade for him? Not much. We'll talk about it right after this.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
All right, everybody, it's time to make some deals here. George Kurtz and I have some buy lows and sell highs potentially for you in week 5 in the NFL. Let's start with a guy who was selected in the first round, a lot of high expectations. People thought he would be the new Devontae Adams for Aaron Rodgers, but so far it's been a lackluster beginning of the season for Garrett Wilson. Now, in his defense, he has faced some tough cornerback matchups. But at the end of the day here, another tough matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. However, after that, I think things might get a little bit better for Garrett Wilson down the stretch run. A lot of buzz surrounding Devontae Adams possibly becoming a New York Jet. We'll see if that happens. But right now, we're at a rock bottom price for Garrett Wilson, who is still a very good talent, still a young player who still has a lot of a bright future ahead of him. And if you look right now, he is the most traded wide receiver of anybody this week in fantasy sports. Now, I want to be the one trading for Garrett Wilson. I want to buy low here because I think right now the slow start is just that, a slow start to the year. I think the latter part of the season could be better for Garrett Wilson, and it's not going to cost me that much to find out. What are you trading for him? That is the question. Would you trade, let's say, a Brian Robinson Jr. for a Garrett Wilson? Or would you be looking to move, let's say, if Dontavian Wicks has a big game today, selling high on him and making a run at Garrett Wilson, who had the big pedigree and the big buzz coming into 2024? George, where are you at with Wilson's value?
Well, I think you already said it correctly. He's had a bunch of tough matchups here, right? And Rodgers does have, Google eyes for Alan Lazard in the red zone. He does. He looks Lazard's way first, which I sort of understand. He knows what Lazard's going to be. Those two know each other. All right, they know they know where each other's going to be. So I understand that. I think things will get better for Wilson. I think they could be in about an hour. Things could get better. All right, Minnesota's a good defense, but not a lockdown defense. We saw it Green Bay and loved it in the second half last week. I would think Rodgers would look to exploit that as well. Buffalo next week, we like that, right? Not the secondary there. And a couple of tougher matchups at Pittsburgh, at New England, could be a problem. But if you could survive that, the rest of the schedule is nice. All right, there's no lockdowns after that. So I'd be looking to acquire him. I wouldn't be looking to trade. If I can live through it, I want to live through it. Obviously, you want to pay less here. Listen, if someone will take Wicks, I don't care what Wicks does today. I don't care. Wicks has 19 catches for 280 yards and 4 touchdowns. All right, someone wants Wicks for Wilson. Wicks, nice knowing you. Thank you. Good luck.
Yeah, I'm in the same mind. But look, to me, you're in a spot here where Mike Williams, Alan Lazard, sure, perhaps they're going to have some moments here, and maybe even some moments today. I know the Vikings defense is another very good one. I expect a lot of pressure on Aaron Rodgers. And look, that's going to kick off in just a few moments from now, too. So we'll keep you on top of all of that as that game continues on here in London. Another wide receiver interesting to buy low on, Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins, along with Tyreek Hill. You can put both these guys in the same bucket. They might have another down week here. If they do, you've got the bye and then another week to wait until you get to Tagovailoa. I'm thinking long-term here. If I am a team right now that's sitting at 4-0, 3-1, and I get another win this week, to me, that's the perfect time to start looking ahead to the future and looking ahead specifically to those Dolphins wide receivers, because I do believe once Tua comes back, that those guys can go right back to being top fantasy performers. This is the window. It'll probably last, regardless of whatever they do this week, another week because of the looming bye, where people can't then start them in the frustration of that setting in, and maybe even the desperation of loss after loss as guys like Waddle and Hill are not returning their investment. So I'm buying both of these guys. Are you buying either Miami Dolphin wideout?
Now, this depends on what you believe in. Joe obviously believes that Tua is coming back after the bye. So do I. All right, but keep that in mind. There's been no word that this is definitive. All right, he's out of concussion protocol, so he's already past that. He is talking to a million neurologists. Smart, it's what he should be doing here. But from what we've heard, no one's told him, no doctors told him you should retire or that you have to retire. Due to these concussions. So I think Tua does return. I do. So yes, I would be willing to acquire. This is where you look at the pounds. All right, if you want Hill or Waddle, you're praying today's another dud, and then they have off next week. And you look at the record. Oh, you're 1-4. You can't wait. Mm-hmm. You can make a good deal here. All right, especially if you're a team that's 4-1, 5-0, whatever it might be. You can afford to take to lose next week to get the player to help you off for the rest of the season. This is how we play the game here. All right, you're looking at a team you can't afford to have. Hill sucks, buddy, and he's off next week. I'll take him off your hands for Dontavian Wicks. There you go. Definitely want Tyreek Hill in this. I think Tua is coming back, so I definitely want someone like Hill. Waddle, I wasn't really big on him coming into the season. All right, so things certainly haven't changed. Guys, they've got worse now. I would want a lower price. I would still take a shot at him, but I want a lower price. But my eyes are definitely on Tyreek Hill, hoping he has another dud this week.
All right, let's talk about some guys maybe to sell. First one is Jonathan Brooks, and I'm a big fan, let me just preface, of Jonathan Brooks. I think dynasty shares are well-deserved here. I have a few myself, and I do think over time that's where the backfield is going. But when these guys are recovering from the ACL surgeries, and I know the practice window is open and people are buzzing about it, and that's great, I think he's got more value now theoretically than he's going to actuality in season. And Chuba Hubbard right now is a guy who's played really well. I think you can't deny that. He is RB 16 on the year. He's averaging 5.4 yards per attempt. He's also got 13 receptions for 84 yards. He's got a couple touchdowns. And with Andy Dalton running the offense, seems a bit better. I don't know if Brooks start working his way in really to serious volume until we get to well into double-digit weeks. And then I don't know if I feel comfortable starting him. So that's where I'm at with Brooks. And then Patrick Mahomes, another guy maybe off name brand value you can deal, because the Justin Fields of the world, the Jaden Daniels of the world, those are the guys getting it done on the quarterback side of things. And another weapon gone for Mahomes is troubling. Where do you stand on these two guys here? Do you think Brooks is somebody who has more theoretical value? And can you still sell Mahomes because his last name is still Mahomes?
Don't want either one. You already said it. Hubbard's played so well that even if Brooks is ready to play, I don't think Hubbard goes away here. Not in a redraft league anyway. Dynasty and a keeper league, absolutely. But not in a redraft. Mahomes, folks, this goes back to last year. He hasn't been a quarterback one like 10 of the last 12 weeks. No. Joe, you and I could try out and play wide receiver for Kansas City. There's nothing there. No, I don't want either one.
Yeah, certainly tough times in KC. They could be in trouble on Monday night. When we return, the deep dive on Stan Darnold.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
Sam Darnold has had a magical year for the Minnesota Vikings so far, and he gets a chance at maybe that revenge game that everybody loves to talk about so much. Look, Darnold's been tremendous here, stepping into that void. He was just supposed to be the placeholder for J.J. McCarthy, but unfortunately injuries derailed McCarthy's opening to the season and his career for the Minnesota Vikings. And now Sam Darnold has taken up the mantle and has done nothing but eat W's. It's been tremendous, and now he gets the Jets. Oh, how I wish this game was in MetLife so Jet fans could witness the glory that is Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings firsthand, but alas, we are in England for this one. However, an incredible stat here when you're looking at what Sam Darnold's done and how historic it actually is to the beginning of the season. Check this out. Sam Darnold is the first quarterback in NFL history to win his first 4 games with a new team and throw 2 or more touchdowns in each of those games. I don't think any of us saw this coming. I think maybe at best we thought Sam Darnold would be a bit of a game manager who could get you through to maybe a mediocre start to the season or maybe a mediocre season period. But you got to give some credit here to Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings, but especially Darnold, who has been kicking around for a while now and seems like he might have finally figured it out. George, what's your takeaway from what you've seen from Sam Darnold so far, and can it keep going for the Minnesota Vikings?
Well, he's played great. All right, right. Take your choice. Comeback Player of the Year award, or I don't know what he came back from. MVP.
Obscurity.
Yeah, I never understand that, by the way. Like Joe Flacco got it last year. What'd you come back from? Being old? I mean, I don't know what you came back from there. But whatever. The awards sometimes drive me crazy. But MVP, certainly, he's had a great start to the season. He saved the Vikings' butt, right? The funny thing is, if McCarthy doesn't suffer the knee injury, he might be playing quarterback right now. Right, or really close to it there, but good for Darnold. The revenge, the revenge theory is interesting. I guess Zach Wilson got a modicum of revenge last week, even though he didn't play, but they beat the Jets here. I think Darnold will perform well today. I do. I'm not expecting him to spit the bit or anything like that. Now, we have seen this before from Darnold, Joe, where he gets off to a good start with a new team. To Carolina a few years back, he played well the first 4 or 5 games, then fell apart. I think he played Dallas in Week 5. Had a good first half. Second half, not so much, and then everything went downhill after that. So it's in the back of my mind here, although I don't think it's going to happen here. I think he'll be solid all season long here. So, yeah, I expect to continue. I don't know about MVP type, and I certainly don't know. He's not throwing 2 touchdown passes every game. So I don't think he is. But I think he's going to have a good, solid season. The Vikings, I didn't have them making the playoffs, but they're certainly making me look wrong there.
I think what's so interesting, George, is you have this cycle we see in the NFL too, where some of these high round draft picks, things don't work out very well for them. And then they kick around the league a little bit. You see Geno Smith finally figure it out a couple years ago. You see Baker Mayfield last year finally put things together, and he's played very well again this year. And then there's Sam Darnold, like Kevin O'Connell, a really good offensive-minded coach, right, who actually knows how to speak to the quarterback, a quarterback himself once upon a time. And now you have all of a sudden the best version of Sam Darnold at the NFL level. And I think that is very telling. There's spots where you feel good about quarterback development and spots where you don't. It's one of the biggest troubles I had getting excited about Caleb Williams, because I just don't look at the Bears as a quarterback factory or a coaching staff that could really grow and develop a young quarterback regardless of how talented they were. And Sam Darnold right now is getting the job done. Now, it's a tough test, right? Travel, New York Jets defense, very good. Certainly the Jets looking to maybe capitalize on some of the weaknesses of the past of Sam Darnold, but maybe he's shed some of those weaknesses. Maybe, just maybe, Sam Darnold is the latest Geno, the latest Baker Mayfield, the latest guy to turn the corner in his development. And I can tell you this, JJ is probably going to be the quarterback next year, but if Sam Darnold takes this team to a long run into the playoffs, there might be some questions about that. And maybe, just maybe, you bring Darnold back for one more run and let JJ just sit with the clipboard for another year. He is pretty young. Or maybe somebody comes knocking at Sam Darnold's door with a big-time long offer. Do you think that he is going to be a starter somewhere else in the league if he keeps this up next year? Because I certainly think that there's a lot of teams that could use a Sam Darnold right now. George, what do you think?
Oh, it keeps absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt. I say it might be with Minnesota, where you just said it. Okay, McCauley rides a clipboard again next year. Didn't get any game action this year, so he'll still theoretically be a rookie next year, right? So yeah, absolutely. And you said it. Even if it's not with Minnesota, we know there's going to be a half dozen quarterbacks next year that don't have a starter. They didn't get one during the draft. They didn't work out, whatever it might be here. So yeah, he keeps this up. He'll certainly be a starter for Minnesota or someone else next season.
We'll see how the Sam Darnold revenge game goes here today. I'm rooting for Sam Darnold. I'm not going to lie. I'm excited for him. I hope it works out well, but sometimes these London games can underwhelm just a tad. Hour one's in the books of FST. Hour two coming right at you. Who to start, we'll tell you right after this.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts, so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back, because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.